Victoria Kwakwa, welcome to CNN Indonesia.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Okay. The IMF and World Bank Group annual meeting 2018 is done, and the IMF revised down in this event for the global growth to for Asia and for Indonesia. How about World Bank?
Well, let me first of all give my sincere condolences to the government and people of Indonesia for the lives that have been lost and the damage done to property from the disasters that happened in Lombok and in Sulawesi. And our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers are with all the families that are bereaved. We stand ready to support the government's reconstruction effort to help put people back on their feet and restore their livelihoods. Now, our sense is that the economies in East Asia in particular are still very resilient, and in the first half of 2018 still showed a lot of dynamism and resilience based largely on demand, and consumption demand is growing, investment demand is growing across the board or in most of the countries in Asia, with the exception of, let's say, Malaysia, of course China as well, with the rebalancing that's happening. So our sense is that growth will taper off a little bit from 6.6 in 2017 to about 6.3%. And for East Asia and Pacific, without China, perhaps be 5.3% in 2019. Now, these are resilient numbers. The continued pickup in consumption demand, the continued pickup in investment demand is going to continue to drive that. What we've also seen is good labor market developments, good job growth and increase in wages, which is also fueling some of the consumption demand growth. So we're confident that the growth prospects for the region remains good. Now, having said that, you cannot ignore the risks that come from the external environment. Of course, the first one is the trade tensions. There's also the more rapid rise in US interest rates than had been anticipated. And then there's also the contagion from emerging markets such as Turkey and Argentina that are in turmoil. So these present downside risks. And depending on how these risks evolve, could have some negative impacts on growth and other macroeconomic conditions. But the fundamentals in the region remain robust. So we believe that countries in the region are well placed to do the right thing, to build the fiscal and external account buffers, and to manage the exchange rate flexibly in a way that they will be able to withstand
the economic development issues. So what are actually that we are facing, the issues right now that we are facing?
Well, one of the big issues that was highlighted is the Human Capital Project. As you might have said, you might have heard, this is an initiative of the World Bank under the leadership of President Kim to really draw attention to the importance of investments in building human capital. A lot of times it's easy to see the need for physical capital, but the human capital, because the impacts take longer to materialize, sometimes we don't pay as much attention to it as we should. So this is really bringing us all back to the importance of human capital, showing the strong links between human capital and productivity of economies and sustained growth. And so making the case, it is important to invest in the sector and build the human capital. So this was one of the big things that we discussed. I think for several of the countries in East Asia, yes, investments have been made, but there's a lot more to be done. And we're not there yet, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's things like childhood stunting. There's a lot more that needs to be done. So that's one of the challenges, but it's also an opportunity, really. And what we hope is that we, through this human capital index that has just been launched, we can help countries address this challenge more. it's even more important because, you know, if you take childhood stunting, children that are stunted are impaired in terms of their cognitive development. And so they cannot learn to their full capacity, which means that, you know, their productivity as adults and participants in the labor market will be impaired. And particularly at a time when you're going to a more digital economy, more skills-based economy, you need high-level skills. Okay. And so stunting prevents children getting into those areas of skills. So that's one thing. I think another area which we touched on very much and which was also evident in the high-level event that Indonesia hosted is about disaster risk management. You know, this region is very prone to climate. It has some of the most vulnerable countries to climate, East Asia and the Pacific. You see what we're seeing in Indonesia today, in Philippines, there's always, you know, typhoons, hurricanes, and so on. So how do you manage your risks of natural disasters? Okay. You know, so there was a lot of conversation about it. First, how to build resilient infrastructure, but also how to put a package of financing instruments together so that if the disaster strikes, you know, you have the financing resources either through your budget reserves, through insurance programs, through contingent financing. And I think this is an area where we can support a lot of countries globally and particularly countries in East Asia to build their systems so that they are more ready and able to manage their disaster risk. And then a third area that we discussed, which is relevant for the region, is that of technology. You know, you see technology is advancing rapidly. Yeah. So the challenge is to really seize the opportunities that technology brings, making sure that everybody can have access to technology, participate and benefit from it. And then also looking at the downside risks and managing that well. We talked a lot about fintech, which is using technology in the financial sector to promote financial inclusion, to provide access to financial services for small and medium scale enterprises, for everybody. You know, that's also a very big emerging agenda. So there are several countries already in the region that are really tapping technology, and you have firms like Gojek and others that are really working on technology platforms. You have Alibaba and so on. Pay now or prompt pay. So the region is already using it, but I think there's a lot more space to tap technology to drive productivity and growth. And this is where the World Bank stands ready to continue to help. And another final issue that came up is debt sustainability. You know, we're finding that increasingly countries globally are more exposed to debt and their debt risks have risen. This is not the case for a lot of countries in East Asia. East Asia, thank God, you know, you don't have a lot of cases of debt sustainability risk. But these are just some examples of some of the development issues. I think the disaster resilience and the climate issues are very relevant for East Asia, the human capital issues, and then tapping the promise of technology. So these are some of the things. But overall, you know also that East Asia faces massive problems with urbanization and how you manage urbanization well. So it's a catalyst for growth and development.
All right. Thank you so much, Victoria Kwakwa, for joining with CNN Indonesia.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.